They're not asking for balance, they're asking for everything. Environmental groups are calling for balanced management here in the San Rafael Swell. If you look across this canyon, everywhere you see across the canyon is a massive wilderness area. There are several massive wilderness areas in the San Rafael Swell. 660,000 acres is essentially managed as closed already. Only around 200,000 is managed for recreation. So how is that balanced? If we really wanted to have balanced management in the San Rafael Swell, we would be releasing 225,000 acres of land from wilderness protections.
Why don't I just walk?
Yeah, why don't you just walk?
Well, I know a lot of people ask that when we talk about trail closures. And I don't think people realize that not everyone can just walk. I can't. I actually am a pediatric cancer survivor. Right before my 16th birthday, I was diagnosed with osteosarcoma of the left tibia, bone cancer. And after a year of chemotherapy and several reconstructive surgeries, I still have a leg, but it definitely doesn't function the way a regular leg does. In fact, half of my bone is donor bone. It's called an allograft, and it is dead. So even though it kept my leg all put together, it can't heal. So if I take a tumble, if I fall wrong, and it gets a fracture or it breaks, I lose my entire left leg.
June 1st is the deadline to submit comments on the Gila Lower Box Management Plan in New Mexico. Yet another proposal for ACECs. They are proposing to take motorized trails that give access to the river and convert them to non-motorized only without compensating with new motorized access. So it'll completely restrict certain users from being able to access the river. So send in a comment by June 1st.
Hey, so I've seen a lot of people talking about this picture in Moab. This is the entrance to 10 Mile Canyon. It now has barbed wire going across it and a closed sign. This is one of the trails that was closed in the Labyrinth Rims Gemini Bridges plan in Moab that was released last October. At BlueRibbon Coalition, we are still challenging this in court. We just recently got the administrative record that was due this week. We got it. It's about 40,000 pages. Our legal team's reviewing that right now. Through the month of June, we will be reviewing that record and preparing our brief. Our brief is due in July. The BLM and the defendant interveners will supply reply briefs in August and September. And then we will have our final brief due on October 11th. And so we'll be working on this all summer. It's not over. We're still challenging those closures. Hopefully we'll be able to overturn them so that that trail can be opened again. So the Forest Service is banning e-bikes. People will argue that because they're motorized, they leave a bigger impact. But that's not true. We couldn't find any studies to back up this claim, so we decided to do our own. We'll have to send these back to the labs, but our initial findings suggest e-bikes have no additional impacts. Hey, so you guys might have remembered right after they closed the 317 miles of trails here in Labyrinth Rims and Gemini Bridges in Moab, Senator Mike Lee introduced the Historic Roadways Protection Act in the U.S. Senate. Next week, on June 12th, there will be a hearing in the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee on this bill, and you can submit comments for the record for this bill. So we've created a form, an action alert, where you can share why you're upset about these closures and explain why you hope the U.S. Senate will support the Historic Roadways Protection Act. All the comments submitted through our form will be added to the congressional record in support of this bill. We hope you'll help us do this. Make sure this shows up in everyone's feed who supports keeping these trails open. We'll do everything we can to push the word out, and let's defend your ground. If you thought the closures in Moab were bad, this is even worse. The area we're talking about is the San Rafael Swell. This area has 2,160 miles of roads. They're proposing to close almost half of them. Here's how you can help. So step 1, find a route that's red on this map that you want to explore. Step 2 is to review the BLM route report for your trail. The route report will tell you what resource concerns the BLM has and what recreation value your trail has. The final step is to go explore your route. Make observations while you're out there. Check to make sure the BLM's information is accurate. Take pictures at various waypoints along the route and then share those back to us. So click the link in our bio for detailed instructions of what to do and where you can send the information once you're done.
Since Chevron deference, the little guy never wins in these cases against the government. It's just so rigged. The judicial branch was rigged against us. The Administrative Procedure Act is really just an act that's designed to almost disenfranchise Americans from the judicial branch of government. That's why BRC exists, is so that we can actually go through all those administrative processes. And I went and shipped off an administrative appeal today in the mail just because you have to do that by a specific deadline. And so nobody in the general public is doing that work. So if you're not, you don't have legal standing, you're not going to take a grievance to the judicial branch. And Congress will be like, oh, we didn't have anything to do with passing that rule or that travel plan or this thing you're upset about. That wasn't us that did that. That was the executive branch. So it really marginalizes the American people and the little guy. And that's what the Supreme Court kind of hinted at, is that
this morning, the Supreme Court decided this case. And in their decision, they overturned a long-standing precedent called Chevron deference. Chevron deference basically means that when Congress writes vague laws, that judges will defer to what the federal agencies interpret those laws to mean. Since 1987, BlueRibbon Coalition has been involved in almost 100 legal cases challenging federal decisions. And when we've lost those decisions, almost every time, it isn't because the merits of the case weren't strong, it's because of Chevron deference. It's because judges defer to federal bureaucrats in their decision making. With Chevron deference overturned, there are now a wide range of federal regulations and rules and decisions that we are ready to challenge. We've been anticipating this getting overturned, and so that's why we've been laying the groundwork for a really strong litigation program at BRC, and we have some exciting announcements coming in the coming weeks, and we hope you'll support us. Today, I'm out here in Yuma, Arizona, and we're fighting to keep 1,250 miles of trails open in this area, just like this one. So if you're from Arizona and you enjoy off-roading, we need you to join the fight. There's a BLM plan moving forward in this area. Go subscribe to our newsletter so that we can keep you updated on how you can help us keep these trails open.
The BLM is considering which routes to keep open east of Moab in the Dolores River Travel Management Area. They've put out a map of routes that in the future they're going to be considering whether to keep them open or to close them. However, there are a lot of routes that are missing from their map. If you've been to the Polar Mesa area, there are routes that they do not have on their map. There are routes that go to dispersed campsites, old mining sites that they do not have on there. So we need everybody, especially if you've ridden in this area, to look at the BLM's map and make sure they're not missing even more routes, because if they don't include those, then they're going to be closed by default. We have until June 21st, Friday, to get comments in, letting the BLM know to keep these routes open to the public.
There are 660,000 acres of the San Rafael Swell that have this level of protection. And that means we need to keep the 200,000 acres that are left for recreation open. Hey, I'm here at the Mexican Mountain Wilderness boundary. If I keep going up this road, I now enter the Mexican Mountain Wilderness area, which means this area has some of the most restrictive land use rules of anywhere on public land. That means the soils, the plants, the rocks, the wildlife, the soundscape, everything is as protected as it can possibly be. You'll see there's one road going up into this area. That is the only road that goes into this area. There are no spur roads. There's nowhere where you can go camping. There's nowhere where you can go exploring. This is the only road. This area is protected. The reason this is important is because the road we came in on had dozens of spur routes that went off to the San Rafael River where people were camping. The BLM is proposing closing all of those. And if they do that, that will create a buffer zone around this wilderness area, which they are not allowed to do according to the law. So we need you to help us and join this fight so that we can keep these campsites open. Earlier this week, we asked you to contact your members of Congress to support some important amendments to the Interior Appropriations Bill. Thousands of you answered the call, and we have some good news to report. The amendment that blocked the creation of new national monuments in Oregon passed. The amendment that blocked the implementation of the Western Solar Plan passed. These two amendments that prevented the implementation of resource management plans in Wyoming passed. The amendment that prevented the creation of the Dolores National Monument passed. And this amendment, which would have restricted funding for the removal of roads, passed. In addition to these amendments, the main text of the bill also blocked the BLM Landscape Health Rule. It prevented the listing of the greater sage-grouse under the Endangered Species Act, and it blocked funding for the management plans for the Grand Staircase Escalante National Monument. Now the Senate will get to work on this, but thank you to everyone who took action. And this is one more reason why I hope everyone will follow this account. The House of Representatives is voting on an Interior Appropriations Bill tonight. The staff is working late, and there are 6 amendments that we need you to support. Amendment 19 would prevent the creation of a national monument in southwestern Oregon. Amendment 43 would prevent the Bureau of Land Management from implementing the proposed Western Solar Plan. Amendment 54 would stop a resource management plan in Wyoming and Montana that we don't like. Amendment 55 would stop the Rock Springs Resource Management Plan that was going to restrict 3 million acres of land in Wyoming. Amendment 98 would prevent the creation of the Dolores Canyon National Monument. Amendment 73 would strike funding for the removal of roads that are no longer needed. We support all of these amendments. You can contact your member of Congress using our action alert. It'll take a minute. They'll be working late tonight. Let's get this done and make sure that these amendments all get passed into this appropriations bill. The BLM is proposing to create illegal buffer zones around the wilderness areas in the San Rafael Swell. To the left of me is the Mexican Mountain Wilderness. To the right of me is areas that Congress said should be managed for multiple use. This road that I'm on, that you can see going off through the trees there, this is the boundary road for this wilderness area. The BLM's proposing to close this road, and one of its alternatives, that would create an illegal buffer zone. I need you to tell the BLM not to create illegal buffer zones in the San Rafael Swell, and we need to get that done before July 22nd. If you hate seeing smoky skies like this, then this is for you. It's obviously fire season out here in the West. Part of the reason that these fire seasons have gotten so bad is because agencies have hundreds of projects that they want to do every year to manage our forests and manage our public lands, and these projects get blocked by environmental lawsuits. One of the things we hear from land managers all the time is they don't get enough public support for these projects where they want to manage our forests. So we started the Western Phoenix Project at BlueRibbon Coalition. We will educate you about these projects. So click the link in our bio, sign up, and let's help these federal agencies prevent all these wildfires. This is the Heisey Overlook. As you can see, this is an amazing view of the Snake River here near Heisey, Idaho. And the route to get up here is still open, but once you get to the top, the BLM closed all the routes that come along the top of this butte. It's a closure that doesn't make any sense. There isn't a practical way to close everything off up here. They'd actually have to build all kinds of barricades and fencing and things that would actually ruin the environment and the views and the landscape up here more than just the occasional person coming up here in a vehicle. And so we're appealing the decision that closed this route, the Upper Snake Travel Management Plan, and we hope you'll support BlueRibbon Coalition as we continue to fight to keep scenic viewpoints like this open so you can come and access them and enjoy them. I'm wondering if there's anybody in eastern Idaho who has the equipment, the resources to put one of these bad boys right here. So the BLM recently closed a road here in the Upper Snake Travel Management area, and it's because this culvert washed out, and they permanently closed it in the travel management plan. I think there are people here in eastern Idaho who would have showed up with the heavy equipment, the materials. I think the state government could have provided the funding to rebuild this route and provide awesome connectivity into this wildlife management area here in Tex Creek. And so there's going to be some administrative procedures to even get that done now. We are actually appealing this plan. because we're looking at every closure and seeing if things were closed for a good reason or not. And I think we could have put the resources together to get this fixed. And I'm curious if anybody watching this video agrees that they have the resources here in Idaho to fix this trail. It's been about a year since they announced the trail closures in Moab, but lawsuits take time and we're still fighting, and I have an important update for you. Just last week, the judge in our case announced that he would agree to allow the state of Utah to combine their challenge with our challenge. So now the state of Utah, the Blue Ribbon Coalition, are joined together to fight to get those trails back open. We've been spending the summer reviewing thousands of pages in the administrative record. We're preparing our initial briefs. The deadlines for those have been extended because of the consolidation of our case with Utah's, but we're still fighting hard. We're still using a lot of resources in this fight. We're committed to fight this as far as we need to go. Those trails are too important. We have to get them open back up, and we're doing everything we can to fight to keep those open.
The BLM is actually proposing to build new roads. This is a harvest plan in Oregon called the Blue and Gold Harvest Plan, but within it, the BLM is looking at possibly constructing 16.3 miles of new permanent road, doing 86 miles of road renovation. There was a bridge that crossed a stream that was ruined about 20 years ago, and there's also a possibility to get that rebuilt so that people can now access that bridge and cross that stream. So submit a comment. We don't see projects and plans like this very often from the BLM to actually increase access. So even if you don't live in Oregon, still submit a comment, because then this project can set precedents for areas near you.
There is nothing that closes more of our public lands right now than wildfires. Whenever a wildfire starts, they have to close all the roads, they close all the recreation area, and sometimes they do that for a whole season. And so that means one thing we can do as public land users is everything we can to make sure we're not starting catastrophic wildfires. And so that means when they're telling you no campfires, follow the rules, do our part, do not start campfires during fire restriction seasons, and let's protect our public lands so we can keep them open and enjoy them. The Bureau of Land Management just announced that they will be closing 1.2 million acres of the Grand Staircase Escalante National Monument. This is a map of the damage. Basically everything that is that purplish blue color will be closed and will not allow motorized access, which means basically most forms of outdoor recreation will be inaccessible in those areas. At Blue Ribbon Coalition, we are currently challenging the designation of this monument in the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals. We have a hearing on September 26 in Boulder, Colorado, to examine whether this was an abuse of the Antiquities Act to designate such a large national monument. Well, that is the primary way we're challenging this terrible decision. We will also likely file a protest to this plan. We will also be paying close attention to whether this meets the governor of Utah's 60-day consistency review. I don't believe it will be compliant with some of the resource management plans that have been passed at the county levels in Utah. We'll be scrutinizing that, and if not, we will find ways that you can help to make sure that the governor of Utah rejects this plan. This is the Goodwater Rim mountain biking trail that kind of goes along the rim of the Goodwater Canyon that drops down into the San Rafael River. This is in the San Rafael Swell. It's a 14-mile bike trail, which is awesome. It goes right along the cliff edges for the whole 14 miles. When the Bureau of Land Management was doing the environmental analysis on this trail, the Southern Utah Wilderness Alliance challenged the decision to have this trail exist because they were worried about endangered cactus. And I just wanted to stop here and show you. I mean, there's a cactus right here growing. You can see mountain bikers don't really like running over the cactus on their mountain bikes. The trail is doing just fine. Both the trail and the cactus can both be here and exist. And so we're glad the BLM decided to open this trail. And it shows you that sometimes the Endangered Species Act just gets used opportunistically by environmental groups just to close things they don't want open. But we're glad that we have the Goodwater Rim Trail. This is an awesome mountain biking trail. Everyone should come ride it. We need to talk about wilderness study areas and why they are a problem. In its simplest form, a wilderness study area is just an area that an agency like the Bureau of Land Management draws a shape on a map and says, we're going to manage this area like wilderness, meaning as restrictively as possible. until Congress decides whether or not to designate that area as a wilderness. My problem with wilderness study areas is they've put a lot of land into this designation that doesn't qualify. If it has a road, it shouldn't be a wilderness study area. Roads disqualify land from being eligible for wilderness. If it has like a fence going to a big field, it's not eligible to be wilderness. This is an area that's been impacted by humans. So this is the Appendicitis Hill Wilderness Study Area in eastern Idaho. There are millions of acres of wilderness study areas all across the United States. Blue Ribbon Coalition is one of the only organizations fighting every day to release these wilderness study areas. If Congress hasn't designated them as wilderness by now, they're likely not going to. Most of the ones I've been in have roads in them, they have impacts from humans, they need to be managed as multiple use. We just had a big win in federal court. At Blue Ribbon Coalition, we have been challenging the commercial film permit requirements on public land. And a few weeks ago, a federal judge in Idaho granted a preliminary injunction, which means Blue Ribbon Coalition and its members are not required to get film permits to film commercial films on public land and then post those videos on social media channels. This is a big win for us. We've been fighting this fight because we care about your First Amendment rights, your freedom of speech, and the Constitution. The judge agreed that we're bringing very legitimate concerns to the table, and we have a big court challenge ahead of us, but until that gets decided, that regulation cannot be enforced on us and our members. This is one more way that we're fighting for you to be able to enjoy and recreate on your public lands. So donate today to support our legal funds so we can keep fighting for you.